Hello Internet, and welcome to a new tutorial. So Bitwig has this little really big feature called operators. And today I want to discuss with you how awesome it is and how we can use it for creative drum sequencing and creating drum loops on the fly. But before we dive into this tutorial, if you would like to support the channel, you can consider buying me a cup of coffee, or maybe becoming one of my patrons, or checking out my presets. They're on my Gumroad and the Sound Directive website, or just leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Content like this is posted every week and special content for my patrons. Now let's dive into this tutorial. So what are operators? According to Bitwig's manual, operators change when or how nodes and other events are triggered. In other words, operators allow you to take sequenced event and animate them with randomness. Okay, the randomness part, I'm not going to focus on it a lot because I'm making sidetrans and I have a lot of randomness going on. So I'm going to, I won't focus on it, but we'll focus on the retriggering and the animating parts. So here we have a really simple loop that I've created for the sake of the tutorial. I'm going to create a simple clip in here, half a bar. And when I go to the clip, I'll write a note in here. And click on the notes. Here we have our operators. So we have 4 types of operators. We have the chance in here, basically the chance of the note playing or not. And this is the parameter that I won't really play with because, as I said, I don't want to introduce a lot of randomness in here. Then we have the repeat. Basically, repeat will retrigger the note as many times as we want. So if I'll go upward, for example, now we will repeat it 7 times, like so. And if I'll go downward, it'll go in fraction of the time. Basically, this is the rate, which is related to our BPM. So this is 1 and 4, basically 1/4 of a bar. So now it'll just play once. But if I'll set it to maybe 1 and 14, you got the idea. Let's move this to 0. Then we have the conditions in here. Basically, when we'll add conditions to when the note will trigger or it won't trigger. Basically, first time it loops, never the first loop, when the fill mode, when the fill button is on, when the fill button is off, etc. You get the idea. I think it's pretty similar to the Electron sequencer with its conditional triggering. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comment section. I don't have any Electron device, but I've heard that they work in this way. And then we have the recurrence. And the recurrence is pretty interesting because it'll add a separate timeline for this specific node inside the whole timeline. So basically, in here, in this condition or recurrence that I've just added, it'll play once every 8 loops. So every time this loop will loop 8 times, it's going to play once. So I'll demonstrate it in a simpler way. So here I have a 1/4 of a bar loop. Let's loop it like so. I'm going to loop it 4 times, and I'll set the recurrence in here to 2, and I'll play it once. So now it'll play the first one, it won't play the second one, the second time, it'll play the third time, not the 4th time. Now we have this. Okay, pretty nice. So these were the operators in a nutshell. Now let's see how we can put them in action. So I'm going to stick to my half a bar loop in here. And what I'm going to do, first off, we have this 1/4 of a bar closed hi-hat. By the way, here we have on the drum channel, we have, drum machine with 1 closed hat, 1 open hat, 1 snare, and another closed hat, which is the same as the first one. Why? I'll show you in a bit. So what I'm going to do in here, first off, I'll take off the recurrence on this note, and I'll add 4 repeat. So now we have this. Pretty nice. But it's static. I want to add some groove to it. Now we can do so by, if we go to the velocity in here, as you can see, we have the velocity for each retrigger, but we can't, unfortunately, we can't change that. So what I'm going to do, I'll take down a little bit the main velocity, And here we have the end velocity. And with this, we can create a curve like this. So now we have the velocity going from lower values to higher values, just like so. But we can add a little touch of, like, let's say, groove to it by hitting Alt and playing with the curve, just like so. So now the first hit is lower in volume than the second, third, and fourth. Okay, but the second, third, and fourth are pretty similar. So now we have this kind of like a groove, which is pretty nice. And I'm going to duplicate that. So now we have this. We've just created a really simple groove. Now let's add some open hi-hats, just like so. Some velocity. Now we have this. Okay, pretty nice. Now let's add some this. Now let's add some movement to the open hi-hat by adding another open hi-hat in here. And what I'm going to do, I'll repeat it twice. This, just like so. Now we have this. And this, I'll add a recurrence of, let's say, 4, and it'll play on the 4th loop. And let's loop the whole thing. So now we have this. Pretty nice. Now let's add a snare. Pretty cool. Now what I'm going to do, I'll add some movement to the snare by adding another note that will play once every 8 loops. So if I'll add a note in here, and I'll add recurrence 8, and it'll play on the 8th time. So now we have this. Pretty cool. Now I always like to end my drum pattern, let's say, with a fast burst of hats. I really like that. So now what I'm going to do here, that's why we have the 4th hi-hat in here. I'll add another long note like so. And this note will trigger only on the 8th loop. Just like so. Let me take down this note. I'm going to mute it. And now this note will have 8 repeats, just like so. Okay, let's take off the recurrence for now. Pretty nice. And the curve of the velocity will go from lower values to higher values in a linear fashion. So now we have this. Pretty cool. So now this one will repeat itself every 8 loops, and this one won't play on the 8th loop. So now we have this. Give it a bit more velocity. Pretty cool. Now, in this tutorial, I have some bonus content for you. So the first thing I want to show you is the timbre option in here. So this is pretty nice because the timbre is an extra modulation coming from the notes in Bitwig. Basically, it's some sort of like expression, just like aftertouch and velocity. And what I'm going to do, I'll use these notes that repeats every now and then to modulate something with these drums. So I'm going to take the first snare in here. I'll crank its timbre, just like so. And I'm going to use it, here we are on the snare, and I'm going to use it to pan the snare, okay? So in here, I can add a modulator called expression, and with the timbre, I'll pan it. So now we have this. Pretty cool. We've just panned it. I'm going to pan it a little bit more. And now these hats that repeats from time to time, I'm going to use them to close a filter on the open hi-hat sound. So again, I'll add expression, just like so. I'm going to use it to close this filter, like so. So now I have this. Isn't this just awesome, having this extra parameter that we can use to modulate stuff around, you know? I think this is awesome, especially that this timbre in here, we can actually draw curves for it. So I won't do it for the hats because it's moving really fast and the modulation won't be really nice to hear, but it's really awesome to have this option that we can use whenever we want. Now I want to show you another really cool trick that we can do with the repeating. So we have this drum pattern going on. Let's unmute these. Okay, so let's say this is the end of our phrase and we want to begin a new phrase, or we just want to play a little bit with the kick and bass and add some variations. Now we can use these operators to add some variations to the kick, and I'll show you how. So we have this reverse in here. Let's move it around just a little bit. I'm going to cut off the drums in here. And I'm going to use, as I said, the operators to create some kick variations. So what I'm going to do, I'll take this drum pattern here. I'll separate it from the main one. I'm going to consolidate it by pressing Ctrl J, just like so. I'll take off all of these notes in here. One long legato note, like so. And now what I'm going to do, go to my expressions in here, and I'll add 10 repeats. Okay, so now we have this. Nothing really appealing about this, but here's what we can do with the repeats. We can drag the notes, just like so, you know, the repeats. So what I'm going to do, I'll drag it to, let's say, 67%. I just want the second trigger to be on the 1/4 of a bar mark in here, okay? So now we have this. So now, put you in context, we'll have this. Pretty cool. And now we can just add a filter in here, because we have a lot of low end going on. I'll use Filter Freak, but you can use whatever filter you would like. Set it on high pass, 4 poles. Open it. I'm going to turn it on. Only in here. And now let's set the frequency 60%, starting at 60%, and then it'll go up like so. That's a little bit too much. And same for the resonance. Crank it to maybe 30%. Isn't this just awesome? I really love the concept of operators, and yeah, they just make life easier, man. So yeah, I really hope you've liked this tutorial. I really hope you've learned something new, and yeah, see you next time.